So today we are talking about the little thing we like to call stats. It is the Q3 stats. Numbers never lie, although they could tell you a little bit of a different story. And what I love to do is break down numbers, okay? Because we can all sit here and tell everybody how awesome we are. We could talk about how great of a year we're having. We could all talk about like the market's hot. But I always say is it you that's doing really well, or is it the market that's actually doing well? And that's the big, difference. That's the big change. We have to understand what the actual numbers show us, because the data will give us a good indicator of where the market actually stands. Now, Q3 was kind of a wild run. It started pretty hot and had a very soft landing. Okay, so like we finished very soft, and I say soft a lot. A lot of people don't understand what I mean. Soft means like bad, like it's not good. It's like not really. If we're going in fast, that means it's a good market. If it's coming in soft, that means it's kind of like a bad market. But Q3 is typically where we see the market start to kind of shift from. I always think we start Q3 with like a big seller's market, and then we slowly shift to like a balance of buyer's market in that Q. It's just like weird. It goes from like 60 miles per hour, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, like we're gonna be hitting traffic. Let's slow down to 40, and it's like we got to get down to 20 here. It's the traffic's getting really bad, and that's just stereotypical Q3. And we got 3 down, 1 to go. It's crazy to think that we've come along this far, and everyone thinks they got great prices on places, and then we get to the back half of Q3 and we start to see the numbers change. As a overall macro market, we have been seeing still the tale of two cities. The tale of two cities has existed since the year 2020. We are now in 2024. We're heading in 2025. I do believe real estate goes in 5-year cycles. Could next year be the last year of the tale of two cities? We will see. But the tale of two cities still states that the outskirts are overperforming and the downtown markets are underperforming. Now, there's a lot of people who think this is going to last forever. Do we think the suburb market will now reign supreme and cities will die? Do we think that offices will no longer exist? Do we think the world is going to end, right? I'm a history guy. I don't believe so. I think we're just in a little bit of a rut downtown, and I do think the market's changing. And I do think that the tale of two cities will slowly change in the next maybe 2 to 3 years. But for the foreseeable future, the immediate future, I think this trend's going to last for another 12 to 24 months. And one thing I can tell you, that looking at the numbers, the best performing properties for this quarter were 2 beds under 500,000. In specifically the outskirts like Lincoln Park, Lakeview, West Town, Wicker Park, Bucktown. Like the 2-bed, 2-bath, under 500,000, washer, dryer, and unit, relatively low assessments. That baby is going to fly. I mean, you can't like price it and just see what happens, okay? The worst performing properties were, condos, 1.5 million or above in the downtown markets. And the downtown markets would be like Gold Coast, River North, Streeterville, south part of Old Town, New East Side, Loop, West Loop, South Loop. We saw that market was hands down hit the hardest. The other thing we have to understand is that these numbers, when we get into these numbers, these things don't tell the full picture, okay? Because we're going to talk about some of the stats on this. And when you look at the stats and you say, whoa, Matt, now let's just give an example. Like, let's look at market time, okay? If we just look at the market time for something that is like in Lincoln Park, okay, and it says it's 48 days, and you've been a buyer looking for a 2-bed, 2-bath, under 500,000, you're like, nothing sits for 48 days. How is that average? It's like, well, guys, you have to remember, it's like there's a lot of properties that are, $4 million in Lincoln Park that's been on the market for like a year, okay? So there's also a lot of like really bad 1-bedrooms on the market that are like 200,000 Lincoln Park that don't have a washer dryer unit and look really bad, and they've been sitting forever. Okay. So like you have to realize these are the averages. This doesn't mean, this is the reality of the 100% clear picture of the market. All this is going to do is paint us a little bit of a better picture of where the market stands. There will always be outliers, okay, inside these stats. So don't freak out. But notice that these stats that we're going to talk about, these come directly from InfoSparks, which gets its information from the MLS. Okay. And I specifically am just doing like the quote unquote downtown market. So like, like South Loop up to like, Lakeview area and then like Logan down. And I know that if you're outside of those areas, like, man, what the heck you don't do? I'm like, listen, we can only do so many stats here, right? We got to keep this a little somewhat simple. So let's kind of get into this. Let's look at where these stats stand. Let's look at sales price. Sales price for those markets were up on average 6.2%. So we saw a very good growth. Now, one thing to note, guys, is that sales price being high, a lot of that comes from places that went under contract in the second quarter and then closed in the third quarter, which makes that sales price seem a little bit higher. Now, the place that had the greatest amount of price growth was Bucktown Wicker Park, that had 18.5%. Wow. 18.5% in Bucktown Wicker Park. The worst performing was the West Loop. They were minus 11%. So that's a big swing. That shows you like a big difference. But then again, let's look at a lot of these outskirts. Logan Square is up 11.6. North Center, which includes Roscoe Village, up 10.1. Westtown 7.8. Lincoln Park 6.9. And then you look at like the Loop, it's minus 0.7, right? You look at the near north side, it's plus 2.1. So we did see some growth, but again, when we talk about the tale of two cities, look at the difference there. Overall, though, the prices were up for the most part in the city, which is a positive sign for the marketplace. Let's move on to market time. Now, market time is your days on the market, DOM, as some say. The average market time was 48 days. So 48 days is the average market time. The highest amount of market time, the king of the land for highest amount of market is none other than the person who's reigned supreme as the king for 4 years plus, the near north side. 97 days on average. They're at 97 days. Now, we look at that compared to the least amount of days in the market. North Center, Roscoe Village, 8 days. 8 days. Think about that. You got 8 days in Roscoe to 97 days in like a River North. That's pretty insane. And again, if we want to look at stuff about how we have the tale of two cities, you got Bucktown Wicker Park, 11 days. Logan Square, 37 days. Westtown, 40 days. Lakeview, 32 days. Lincoln Park, 48 days. So you see that they have much smaller amounts when you compare it to, like the more of the downtown markets. The Loop's at 73 days, which is down, by the way. South Loop's 82 days. West Loop's 50 days. So you do notice that tale of two cities really shows you in a market time as well. Now, again, guys, a lot of this market time is because these places went under contract in Q2. So Q4 numbers are going to be really interesting to see about like the market time differences. Months of inventory. Months of inventory is my favorite stat. Months of inventory to me dictates if a market is a buyer's market or seller's market. 4 months of inventory is considered a balanced market, okay? On average, the city had 3 months of inventory. So that would indicate that the market was that would indicate that the market was a seller's market during Q3. Now, the highest amount of inventory, guys, surprise to nobody, was the near north side tied. The near north side was tied with the Loop at 5 months of inventory. Now, let's look at that compared to the outskirts. The best performing was North Center with 1.4 months of inventory. 1.4 months compared to 5 months. That's a huge, huge difference. And like I said earlier, you break down the outskirts for a 2-bed, 2-bath, under 500,000 with a washer, dryer, and unit. You got less than 3 to 4 days of inventory compared to a $1.5 million place in, River North that has, 18 months of inventory. There's a big difference. So these numbers kind of show you a little bit of the picture, but on a wider spectrum. This is your averages, right? But if we dig deep into some of the other outskirts, Bucktown Wicker Park, 2.3 months. Logan Square, 2.6. Westtown, 3.1. Lakeview, 1.9. Lincoln Park, 2.2. Okay, and then, of course, when we look at the downtown markets, West Loop, 3.3, South Loop, 4.1, Loop, 5, near north side, 5. So there's a big difference in the months of inventory as well. That shows you a clear picture that the outskirts are sellers markets and the downtown markets are buyers markets. Closings. Now, this is the stat that matters, right? Now, I like months of inventory because it shows you where a market is. But closings, if you ain't ABC, always be closing, right? Coffees for closers, then it doesn't really matter. Right? So where did closings stand? Well, closings were down 1%. So technically speaking, closings were down. Now, this is quarter over quarter. So, we look at the fact that, of course, closings are going to be down a little bit from Q2. Now, the area that had the least amount of closings was the Loop, and they were minus 22.2%. They were negative 22.2% for closings. That's a huge stat. And the place that had the most amount of closings was Logan Square, which was up 37.6%. I mean, that's a huge, look at that. You look at the Loop, that's negative 22.2. You look at the near north side, which is negative 0.6. And you compare that to Logan, which is up 37.6, to Bucktown, which is up 16.5, compared to Lincoln Park, which is up 12.4, compared to North Center, which is up 6.7. I mean, what a difference. You cannot talk about a clearer picture of a tale of two cities than that. Now, guys, again, these are just the numbers. And I know I got a lot of guys out there that are big numbers people. They're number geeks. They like to look at the stats. They like to look at the numbers. I look at the numbers. I use these numbers as a portion of what I think happens in the marketplace. What I do is I look at the numbers. I read a bunch of articles on what's happening in the economy, worldwide political specter. I look at wars going on. I look at everything, and I factor the numbers in. And then I look at the human accountability. I look at what human nature is doing, how people are reacting to me when I ask them why they're buying, where they're buying. And then I use all of that to try to predict where the market's going to go in the next quarter. And I do that every single quarter, and I look at it from a quarterly basis, from a half-yearly basis, a yearly basis, and a 5-year basis to try to understand where do I think the market's going to head. As we look back at Q3, I'd say that it was a very strong quarter. I wouldn't say this was a bad quarter. I'd say it was a strong quarter. It wasn't like the greatest quarter we've ever seen, but it definitely wasn't like an 08 bad. I think the city has a lot of room still to grow, and there's a few big things that I'm noticing that is really starting to take off, and that's we're seeing a lot of out-of-state buyers, we're seeing a lot of empty nester buyers, and we're seeing a lot of people getting forced back to work, which is causing our city to get even more popular. So I think while the rest of America is going to start slowing down, Chicago is going to start picking up. And we all expect Q4 to be a slower market because, let's face it, it's a frightful fall. You got the presidential election, you got holiday season, right? But I do think that that once we get through the election, and let's call it, the month of December, I think we're going to have a December to remember, right? Let's bring back that Lexus commercial right there. I think we're going to have a December to remember. We're going to be through the election. I think we're going to have a lot of people that have been amped up to buy. You're going to have hopefully lower rates, although they just bumped up. And then you're going to have a lot of people trying to get a leg up on that spring competition. And, we're going to do a whole podcast on December to remember, but this is something kind of watch, but don't take my word for it, guys. Let's look at the numbers. Stats don't lie. So thanks for listening to Laricy Live, and tune in next quarter to see what happened and how things shaped up for Q4.